Good morning, everybody. Welcome in to a Week 16 edition of the Establish the Run First Look Show. I am your host, Gary Hartman, here with you to break down what is the third to last regular season main slate on DraftKings. We do this every Tuesday morning. If you are new here, rapid fire style, going position by position with our first impressions of what this slate looks like. First player takes, first general thoughts. Purpose of this show is first thing after the last games on Monday night to start transitioning our heads from one slate to the next. Crazy, we are here in week 16. I hope all of you have had much success here over the last couple of weeks. Hope that you've been able to advance further along in the playoffs in your season-long leagues. Hope some of you had some great best ball advancement onto the semifinals for this coming weekend. Hope your laundry wearing is going well for the teams you root for. Certainly not for me and my Giants. But I digress. Let's set the table for what this slate looks like before we dive in to the nitty-gritty here. It's only a 9-game slate. You would think, oh, we're getting late in the season. Obviously, there's no buys. We would think, oh, we're getting back to 11, 12, 13 game slates. But no, only 9 for a couple of reasons. One, we have 2 Saturday games again. Last week we had 3. This week we have 2. So that takes 2 off the mat. We still have our normal Thursday night, Sunday night, Monday night game. But in fact, on Monday, we have 3 games, and that is Christmas Day. And the NFL is going with a triple header on Christmas once again, kind of trying to step in the NBA's lane. Come on, NFL, just let the NBA have their one day. But that said, we do have 3 Monday games. So let's go through what all those primetime games are off the main slate. Thursday night is Saints Rams. So no Kamara, no Puka Cup or Kieran Williams. Saturday games, Bengals Steelers, somewhat consequential there. And then Bills Chargers. Obviously, no Bills on the slate is a big deal. Sunday night, Patriots Broncos. That one's certainly less consequential for fantasy purposes. I don't think that is really impacting much at all. But Monday, here are 3 games Monday on Christmas Day. We have the Raiders Chiefs at 1:00. Certainly a game that will be missing some people on the main slate there. Giants Eagles at 4:30. So no Eagles there. And then Ravens 49ers to round out week 16. Obviously a big one as well that we're keeping off the slate, and a huge one, potential Super Bowl preview. As far as game environment of these 9 games that are on the slate, I will say it's better than many of these bigger slates that we've seen of late. Lots of decent over-unders. We have a 50 for the first time in a while, at above 50, and only 3 of the 9 are below 40. So we'll take you through some of those. So Cowboys Dolphins, that is probably going to be the one that is the most popular. That's a 425. That's a 51.5. And you understand why that is. That's in Miami. Obviously, Dallas coming off that loss in the bounce back. Miami looked great last week, even without Tyreek Hill, against a tough Jets defense. And this is a team that, 2 prolific offenses, especially in the second half of the year for Dallas, Miami all season, that can really score and put up points. Like if that game goes off, you're going to need that game. So we'll keep that in mind as we kind of go through here. Then you jump down about 6 points to Lions Vikings. That's a 46.5. So, also not a bad environment. It sounds like Nick Mullins is going to start again. That's in division, still in a dome, of course. Mullins showed an ability to move the ball last week. That is promising for all DFS, best ball, fantasy bags, all of that stuff. So we'll keep that in mind as well. And then we have 244.5. So also still not terrible. Colts, Falcons, and Cardinals, Bears, a 43.5 in the Jaguars, Buccaneers. And then 242.5 Seahawks, Titans, and Browns, Texans. The other 3 games are below 40. So again, we've seen a lot of, like this past week, for example, I think every single 1:00 game was in the 30s for over-unders. This is a much better overall potential scoring environment than we've seen even on a 9-game slate. From a team total perspective, though, we don't have things that pop off the page too much. The Dolphins are 26.25. That is the highest on the week. The Lions, 24.75. The Cowboys, 24.75. The Bears, 24.25. Colts, 23. Texans, 22.5. Bucks, 22.5. Seahawks, 22.25. Vikings, 21.75. Falcons, 21.5. Jags, 21. So that's a lot of teams projected to score 3 touchdowns or more, right? Between 21 and almost 27 points. So, a lot of offenses we can attack on this slate. So why don't we just dive right in here to quarterback? And, with all those teams that are off this main slate, we do not have any Josh Allen, no Patrick Mahomes, no Jalen Hurts, right? Our top 3 quarterbacks in fantasy that we've been considering our top 3 all year off this slate. So what does that mean? Our top 3 quarterbacks from a price perspective, all under 8K. 1, 2, they're Dak Prescott, Tua Tagovailoa, and Justin Fields. Dak and Tua are the most expensive quarterbacks in that 51.5 game in that everyone's going to want to attack. Dak, 7-9, coming off, his first real dud in a long time. I mean, this guy had been one of the surest things in fantasy sports for the second half of the season. 30 points, 32, 31, 35, 3 of 4 weeks, and then a 41 just sprinkled in there, casually. And then he also had a 28.26 also in there. So now the last 2 weeks, though, 18.94, that's fine, 19 points, and then 7 against Buffalo. Going into Miami, you got to figure there's a good chance that he's going to get back up to that 30-point range, but no sure thing. So I like him quite a bit. I think paying up for one of Dak or Tua is a very smart way to approach this slate. Salary should allow it, but there's a lot of quarterbacks you can attack on the slate. So we'll talk them through. Tua also same thing, right? Dallas still overall good defense. The way that Buffalo moved the ball on them this past week, I mean, that was a rainy game. Take all that for a grain of salt. Dallas has been, for the most part, done a pretty good job getting thrashed through the air recently. Seattle was the one team in week 13 that had a lot of success. So Miami will try to replicate that type of success again. This is the Miami offense. Tyreek Hill's supposed to be back. They're at home. I got to think that this is a pretty good spot for Tua. I would like to, again, Vegas thinks this game's going to go back and forth. If it goes back and forth, Tua is just as good as Dak. They're only 100 apart, so it's kind of like you don't really have to try to pay down to get exposure to the game. You should stack up the team that you feel better about. I'd want exposure to both guys. But then you get Fields, 700 less than Tua, 800 less than Dak. And yeah, it's been kind of an every other week thing for Fields right now. This is a really good matchup with Arizona. If you look at the every other week, we're due this week. Yeah, 24-12, 24-11. So this that pattern says we're going to get at least 24 points out of Justin Fields this week. I do tend to think that that's really well within the range of outcomes in a game against Arizona. Obviously, last week was tough against Cleveland. They're back home against Arizona. We'll keep an eye on weather because you never know, late December in Chicago. But if it's bad, I mean, him running a lot is certainly not a bad thing, right? Those rushing attempts are still there. I like Fields a lot this week. I really do. We're not going to CJ Stroud, who I'd imagine will be back off a concussion, but at home against the Browns, that's not the spot I want to go to. Goff, you could click on Goff this week. Now Goff's kind of in this no man's land where like he's 6'9", and I either feel like I want to get up to this range or there's a bunch of guys in the 5s and low 6s that I would get to. But Goff coming off his best game in a while last week against a Broncos team that had been playing much better defense. Yes, that was at home. He threw 5 touchdowns. This game in division, it gets a Vikings team that has gotten in a lot of back and forths and still in a dome. Prefer home Goff, but I do like Goff here. I like attacking this Lions-Vikings game. I really want to see where ownership comes in between the Lions-Vikings game and the Dolphins-Cowboys game. Dolphins-Cowboys game has a lot more expensive pieces. Lions-Vikings game does have Jefferson and Amon-Ra, et cetera, but not as pricey to get all the way up if you include the quarterback. So curious where ownership comes in. I like attacking both of those games, and I will be attacking Goff a little bit this week. We'll hold any analysis on Trevor Lawrence, who is in the concussion protocol. I don't think I'm going to CJ Beathard this week. I think that's getting a little bit too cute. In the largest field, assuming Beathard starts, in the largest field, I think you can do it because it's a great matchup with Tampa Bay. But there are a lot of these quarterbacks in this low 5K range that I think you could take shots on. So or mid 5K, whatever. I don't know if you need to go to Beathard. I don't know what kind of ceiling he really has. I mean, he was 9 of 10 after he came in for T-Law. But, it's been a while since we've seen any kind of real CJ Beathard of it all. So, yeah, I think I'm not super interested there, but we, keep an eye. We'll see what trust projections on that one. I think the matchup is good. That was too much CJ Beathard talk. Jordan Love, I don't think this is a great spot. 6'5", going into Carolina. Carolina could definitely, one thing they do well is not give up big games through the air. Jordan Love's come crashing back down to earth over the last 2 weeks after playing really, really well. And if I'm playing in that range, I'd rather just give me Kyler at 6'4". Kyler at 6'4" is a really good price for Kyler Murray. On the other side of that Fields game, if you want to attack this one, as I said, this is a 44.5, so kind of tied for third best game environment of the week from an over/under perspective, and you save $100 from, or sorry, not $100. You save $600 or so, $700 from Fields. So I think Kyler at 6'4" is a really nice price. I like Howell this year, but I don't think I like him against the Jets. I know what we just saw Tua do against this team. This is in New York. I don't think I want to attack that. Mayfield certainly has a shot at back-to-back breaking slates, back-to-back back-to-back, like advancing people in best ball, the whole thing. 6K. So they priced him with $300. Had 33 points last week. Was the optimal quarterback with Chris Godwin. We finally saw Godwin come around. 381 yards and 4 touchdowns in Green Bay. Now they come home and they get a Jaguars team that maybe a little bit defeated because of Trevor Lawrence. They've given up a ton of big games through the air. Baker Mayfield is going to be like a cash game option this week. There's no doubt in my mind. So Baker, yeah, you're going to have to consider him for sure. Geno should be back here. He almost played last night, was active, didn't play. Drew Lock did pretty well. Geno's been much better the second half of this season. Has missed 2 weeks in a row, though. So, we'll wait and see. I don't know if that's my favorite type of play this week. Minshew against Atlanta is just meh. Flacco could definitely make your player pool. Again, throwing the ball over 40 times each of his 3 starts. Over 374 yards and 2 touchdowns this past week. Did have 3 interceptions. Certainly looked a little bit more like the old Joe Flacco that we were seeing at the end of the Ravens days and on the Jets. But still really impressive what he's doing behind this Browns offensive line. And it's cheap and it's a good matchup. Like you can really go there. It's crazy to think to me that we're talking in week 16 of the 2023 season. We're talking about Joe Flacco as a DFS option on the Browns, but that's kind of where we're at. You can also go to Nick Mullins, who did his thing with 22 points, got over 300 yards, 2 touchdowns. I don't think Nick Mullins is a great quarterback, but I think at this point he's proven that he can move the ball. He's serviceable. And in a game at home against the Lions, who have struggled defensively the second half of this season, that's a really solid option at 5,300, which is kind of why if I'm going in this 5K range, I want to go to him, and I don't really want to go to these guys underneath him, right? We'll see if Tannehill or Malik Willis starts. Maybe in the largest field you can go to one of those guys. I'm assuming Willis is 45 for Malik Willis is really cheap. So I think that would be an option for you. If you have not seen, Will Levis has a high ankle sprain, so we do not expect him to go this week. I think the Titans were eliminated, so they don't really have any reason to get a look at Tannehill. So that's something to consider there. And then it just was announced that the Falcons are going back to Heineke from Ritter. They're at home against the Colts. It's not a terrible spot. I don't know if I love that, though. Zach Wilson, we'll see if he's available. Weird thing that happened with him with the concussion and all that stuff. Listen, I'm not a Zach, he's 4,800. If there's a game where he can repeat his performance that he had at home against Houston 2 weeks ago, it's against Washington at home. So keep an eye at who starts a quarterback for the Jets. So that's basically what I'm saying is there's a lot of tournament options for you at quarterback this week. And that's with the top 3 guys off the slate. So guys who don't like for me, it's like the Jordan Love. I don't love this week. CJ Stroud. I'm not really into Minshew here or Geno probably. I'm okay just kind of writing those guys off and taking all these other options that I have for me in tournaments. Running back, this is the most fascinating running back slate I've ever seen in my life. Really, really interesting. I think it's the thinnest one I can remember. So let's just break down all the guys that are not on the slate. I know I broke down the teams, but I think it really helps to hear the names. No Christian McCaffrey, no Alvin Kamara, no Karen Williams, no Austin Eckler, no Saquon Barkley, no DeAndre Swift, no Joe Mixon, no Jalen Warren, no Najee Harris, no James Cook, no Josh Jacobs, no Isaiah Pacheco, Jerick McKinnon, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, whoever starts, no Gus Edwards or whoever is going on with the Ravens, okay? That's a ton of running backs off the slate, a ton. And it's not like it's teams that we don't really click on their running backs. Those are all teams that we click on the running backs quite often. So what does that leave us? Rashad White is our most expensive running back on the week at 7.4. And he's been one of the surest things in fantasy. And I think, again, this is a decent spot. But just because of the variant nature, I think, of this particular running back slate with all those high floor guys off, I don't know if you want to depend up into Rashad White. I think he's okay. I think he's good. I mean, he's got a really nice passing floor. I think I want to pair him with Baker often if I just really want to lean into that Bucs offense. But again, one of the highest floors, really good cash play, really good cash play. But I just don't know what the ceiling ultimately is. I mean, he's had a 28. What I'm saying ceiling ultimately is for the price, okay? I do think he's got that 27, 28 in them every now and then in the right matchup. But I think more often than not, he's been in the high teens, and he's 7.4. I just want to see where ownership comes in. I don't think he's a bad play. All Raheem Mostert does is score touchdowns, so if you're trying to attack this game big time, not a great matchup on the ground against Dallas, but James Cook just gashed them. I'd expect Achane to be more used. He was kind of 50-50 to go last week. Mostert, though, just 20 touchdowns on the season is insane. I do think you should probably be considering him as a way, I always talk about attacking spots, right? So if you really want to attack this Dolphins-Cowboys game, and I'm talking about through the air, if you want game stacks, that's fine. But if you're building a portfolio, you definitely want some exposure to the running backs as well. That's how you kind of cover your spot. Also, we don't talk about defense on the show, but something that also to consider when you don't have skill position players in that game, but you're invested in it heavily, you should be attacking the defenses in your other lineups that do not attack that game, right? You want to make sure you have all your bases covered. So that's how someone like Mostert this week at 7-3. We'll see how much the field gets to him as someone that's kind of just been like the cream of the crop of touchdown scorers from the running back position this year. And on a slate where there's not, it's a very thin running back slate. Curious where the field comes in there. Let's wait and see on the Indianapolis stuff. Sounds like Jonathan Taylor might be back. Not a great matchup with Atlanta, but something to consider. Already talked about Achane. I think he's definitely going to be good. There's only 200 less than Mostert. Curious where ownership comes in there. Probably the better tournament play with that ceiling. Gibbs really just crushing. I just saw a tweet that sorry that I don't have credit. I just saw a tweet that he now leads the league in 20+ yard runs more than Christian McCaffrey. So he's a really dynamic, explosive player. This is a good game environment to attack. I think a lot of people that have advanced in best ball playoffs round 1 were Jahmyr Gibbs teams. That Lions team in general with those 5 touchdowns last week, or 5 passing touchdowns plus another touchdown. The 42 points that they put up on Saturday was a big catalyst, I know, for a lot of people, and he was a big part of that. But then you got Montgomery as well, who, again, I think at this point Gibbs probably is the higher ceiling player, but David Montgomery for sure, still someone that I'm really interested in, still the guy that they trust when they have the game in hand. Did have 19 total touches still last week. 5 yards of carry. He's been efficient on the ground behind this offensive line. I like Montgomery just fine. And then, Derrick Henry, December should continue here. Really struggled against Houston. They basically sold out to stop him. 16 carries for only 9 yards. Still did have 20 touches. Very encouraging there. We like December Henry back home against the Seahawks. Pretty good matchup. I like this spot here for Henry, who, I feel like the field's not going to run a really click coming off the last 2 weeks where he didn't really hit pay dirt. I think, again, late season Derrick Henry, to me is something that you can always invest in. Pollard, certainly been one of the more disappointing seasons in all of fantasy. But again, if you're attacking this game, you want to attack the spot, should be involved quite a bit. I'd actually use him in my DAX stacks, like treat him as another receiver. If you look at some of his target stuff, and if you go look historically, there's a lot of stuff where running backs paired with quarterbacks, especially when offenses score a lot of points, is certainly viable. ETN's way too cheap, I think, for how good he's been overall this year. They pretty aggressively bumped him all the way down to 6-6. This isn't the best matchup against Tampa Bay, and we'll see who's starting at quarterback. They might be able to really sell out to stop him. So I'd kind of keep an eye on the situation there. But that price is good. I already talked about the Colts stuff. I mentioned not like Jordan Love, but the Panthers are like a tale of two teams on defense. They can really stop the pass. They cannot stop the run. If A.J. Dillon's out again, Aaron Jones in his first game back had 17 touches. Didn't do too much, but they couldn't find the end zone. Only 10.9 points. But, this is a guy that still has a pretty big ceiling, if you ask me. Kind of been a lost season for Aaron Jones since week 1 was his only big game. Has been hurt a lot. And then was kind of like eased back in on pitch counts for a lot of the times he came back from these injuries. But I kind of like attacking him here where he might just fall through the cracks. I'm curious where ownership comes in. I think he's going to project pretty well. So he might get steamed up a little bit, but that's something to consider. And then Bijan also killed everybody last week. What is Arthur Smith doing? I really don't get it. I just don't understand. It was a great matchup with Carolina, the same matchup we just talked about. And I know everyone is frustrated with Arthur Smith, but it makes absolutely no sense. You got a chance to redeem yourself, Artie. You're at home against the Colts. Another great matchup. You got to win the game. Give the ball to your best player, and he's far too cheap. I know it's so freaking frustrating. I hope he's not turning into Kyle Pitts. I don't think he is because they're running back, different story. I will be going right back to the Bijan Robinson. Well, I'm sure the field will too. That's very cheap. And we remember there was a stretch here, weeks 9 through 13 or 10 through 13, where he was getting 20 touches a week. Hopefully we get back to that of it all. Kenneth Walker looked great last night. Really was encouraged to see that. 19 for 86 on the ground, another 3 for 26 through the air. So over 100 all-purpose yards, did find the end zone on his way to 20 DraftKings points. Gotta like that. Still splitting with Sharps, but I think they trust Walker more here in this spot. And against Tennessee, it's just middle of the road matchup, but you could definitely get there. Breece Hall, really cheap. I want to see you starting a quarterback, and he's such a home run hitter. Like you're going to get 2 like you got in 15, or you're going to get 27 like you got in Houston. Again, I already mentioned with Zach Wilson, if there's a game in which the Jets can repeat the offensive success that they had 2 weeks ago, it's here at home against Washington. So I think Breece Hall is actually a really good tournament play on a week where running back is just like, there's solid running back options. Just your pool is like smaller and condensed. Like curious if ownership condenses around certain guys. It's going to really have to keep an eye there. For now, let's wait and see on the Washington front. Brian Robinson missed last week with the hammy. I'm sure he's going to be questionable all week, so that's going to have to be a wait-and-see approach. Antonio Gibson did bust this past week as they gave a lot of work to Chris Rodriguez down the stretch. Gibson still did have 9 total touches. Not great, though, there for Antonio Gibson. You can run on the Jets. That's one thing to consider, but I'd rather it be like a Brian Robinson type through the tackles. James Conner, too cheap for his role. I'll tell you that much. At 5,900 against Chicago, way too cheap. And they kind of haven't brought him up over 6K since week 3. I don't really understand that. Still a bell cow type workload there. Chuba Hubbard, good matchup here, and he's really earned full-on alpha role, right? 22, 23, 25 carries the last 3 weeks. They're not trusting Bryce Young to put the ball in the air under this new coaching staff, so you know he's going to get work. 5.7, way too cheap for that kind of workload as well. So Chuba's also a good play. A lot of options here. Ty Chandler, not a great matchup with Detroit. They are better at stopping the run, but I do think that he is a good player. I'm a fan of Ty Chandler, and we did get the coach speak from Kevin O'Connell that he is going to be the lead back now after that 27.7 point performance. So I think he's going to be certainly in play as a person to attack in that game. Don't want to go to Singletary against Cleveland. Jerome Ford you can go to against Houston. Has a floor. Not sure what the ceiling is these days with Kareem Hunt kind of being the goal line guy a little bit. And then from there, I'm not getting into too many of these other names here. I think everyone else is kind of just a punt. Tyler Algier can probably make your player pool just based off the amount of touches he's getting. He's not being very efficient with it. Same thing with Chris Rodriguez if Brian Robinson's out. All right. That was a lot of running back. I know, interesting position there. Let's go quickly at receiver here. Not the same case at receiver. There's still plenty of studs to be had. Tyreek Hill is expected to be back this week. I'm never worried about matchup with Tyreek Hill. When Tyreek Hill's out on the field, I want as much exposure to Tyreek Hill as I can get. CeeDee Lamb, same thing, big bounce back spot. Still ended up kind of okay in week 15 because he had 7 for 53 and got in on that rushing touchdown towards the end of the game, so it didn't completely bust. But it was not one of the 30-point games that we're looking for out of CD. I like this as a bounce back spot against Miami in the nice weather. Really like this spot for CD. Amon-Ra as well. Really good matchup with the Vikings in Minnesota in the Dome. Amon-Ra just one of the steadiest things in DFS. And then Jefferson is still way too cheap. He's going to get overshadowed by what Jordan Addison did this past week. But guess what? Justin Jefferson, his first real game back, had 10 targets, 7 catches for 84 yards. And he's 8,100 for Justin Jefferson because he didn't explode. His price stayed the same. This is an awesome Justin Jefferson spot. I would be pounding Justin Jefferson in DFS, I think, this week. And if you were lucky enough to get a Jefferson team through in best ball, you got to be feeling really good. I was very close to getting one through in BBM, and it came up like a quarter of a point shy, which is unfortunate because I do think he can really be breaking the slate this week. I really am a fan of the profile of Jefferson. And then Waddle, I feel the exact opposite on. So Waddle was too expensive for now that he's not like the 1B this year. He's a true 2 to Tyreek. He's been too expensive all year at 7.6. They just know that this Dolphins offense, you want exposure, to break the slate, they got to price it up. Now he goes out and has his first 30-point game of the year without Tyreek Hill, and they bring him up $400. I can't get there. Like, I want him in game stack, so when I want to get full-on exposure to this Dolphins game, and I think he's a very good player, I think he can get 30 points with Tyreek Hill on the field, but he should not be 7-8. He really shouldn't. Mike Evans gets a good spot against Jacksonville, and all he does is just continue to score touchdowns. So I think if you're getting Baker, you're going to want to pair him with Evans quite a bit. And perhaps the field's going to go to Godwin this week again because he finally went off for a 10 for 155, one of those classic Chris Godwin games. I think that's definitely a play to look at. But I prefer going back to Evans because I think the field will go to Godwin in that mid-tier. Pittman's a little too expensive in a tough matchup for me this week, and he got concussed, so let's wait and see there. DJ Moore, if I'm playing Fields, I want DJ Moore. That's a pure correlation piece. Let's wait and see what the Houston receivers, not the best matchup with Cleveland, but you got to see who's available there for Nico. Tank Dell's still out for the year. DK Metcalf, good matchup here in Tennessee. Was kind of disappointing last night, only 5 for 78, but still a big ceiling. We saw what that was 2 weeks ago against Dallas. I kind of like this spot for him against Tennessee as well. Amari Cooper, starting to find a little bit of a chemistry with Joe Flacco, 4 for 109 and a touchdown, kind of just in the middle of no man's land, although it is a good matchup against Houston, so I don't mind that. And then Calvin Ridley, I would actually really be into Ridley in this spot against Tampa because you've been able to throw on Tampa all year. He's due for a bounce back game. He's kind of been he's been so yin and yang this year. He's just either full on single digits or breaking the slate. If it was Trevor Lawrence, I would take the shot on the break of the slate at 6.3, but I don't think it's going to be Trevor Lawrence, and that scares me. I already talked about Godwin. Hopkins, it's really dependent on who's quarterback, but I'm a little scared off now with assuming it's not Levis, who's a really good quarterback for Hopkins. I don't think Willis or Tannehill are particularly great for him. Addison, I already mentioned, broke the slate with a 6 for 111 and 2 on Saturday. Again, Jefferson out-targeted him by 4 or 5 targets. It was the 2 touchdowns. I mean, this is variant. I like Jordan Addison. I'm happy he did it. He helped me advance a couple best ball teams, but this is variance, man. Like, I want Jefferson this week if I can find it. I'm not saying Addison's a bad play. In your double stacks, Mullins or bringbacks with Goff, like sprinkle in Addison, sprinkle in Hawkinson. We'll talk about Hawkinson in a second, but Jefferson's my favorite guy there. Thielen has really just kind of fallen flat on his face since that crazy beginning of the season. They've been force-feeding Jonathan Mingo targets. Either way, you don't really want to attack the pass game of Carolina these days. Garrett Wilson, really good spot against Washington. Let's see who starts at quarterback with 5'8". Garrett Wilson against the Commanders. He's going to be like a cash play. That's a good play. McLaurin, tough spot against the Jets, and I doubt he kind of repeats last week's. Finally had a huge game last week. Doubt he repeats that against the Jets. Now, those Jets gave up big games last week to Jalen Waddle. I think that was more fluky at home against Miami. They couldn't keep up with that offense. This is back home against a similar opponent in Washington. I'd have a hard time getting to Terry McLaurin. Lockett is really cheap at 5'6". So again, I don't mind that. And then, you got your normal guys here, those rookies, the Downs, Reeds, Dobbs. London's really cheap again at 5'1". We'll see if Heineke maybe can breathe a little life into him. He can make it bull. And then we'll talk about all the under 5K guys on cheap wide receiver volume. From a tight end perspective, we have no Kelsey or Kittle. The real question is, can the Sam Laporta train continue? 2 of the last 3 weeks, 28.6 and 32 DraftKings points. That's sandwiched by a 4.7, so you don't want to see a pattern continue here. If the pattern continues here, that means we're getting a single-digit performance this week. However, really strong player right now. I mean, he showed more of a ceiling right now than Amon-Ra. Amon-Ra's got the better weekly floor, but this 32, like 29, got 3 touchdowns last week. This is the best rookie tight end season of all time. Something you can't ignore. Hawkinson, I really like. His price really hasn't moved. He's kind of been right around this high 5, low 6K range, but I like this price for TJ Hawkinson. Again, Jefferson's my favorite pass catcher here by a lot at 8-1, but you have different price tiers of Jefferson, Hawkinson, Addison, Ty Chandler. I like all these guys in this game that I really want to attack. I do like Hawkinson quite a bit. From there, Trey McBride was the cover boy of the video. I never thought that would be the case, but the guy is an absolute machine. Another 10 for 102. Game script always seems to be working in his favor as well as they play from behind and they just pepper him with targets. It's really an unbelievable role. I know Adam had just tweeted that the role is absurd. He's earning both targets and producing with them. I'll just read Adam's tweet verbatim. Leads all tight ends in targets per route run at 27%. Here, you know what? I'll pull it up on the screen here. Leads all tight ends in targets per route run at 27%. Trails only Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams among wide receivers in targets per route run. That's unbelievable. Leads all tight ends in yards per route run at 2.3 and would be 14th among all wide receivers in yards per route run. I mean, that's insane stuff there from Trey, Gronk, McBride. 5'7" is too cheap for that kind of role. Sign me up. It's a great matchup with the Bears. Ingram also gets a really good matchup here, but I'm scared off of the quarterback situation. And Njoku has been Flacco's favorite target by far over the last 2 weeks. Huge games, breaking the slate, 27, 29. We always knew this talent was in there for Njoku. I don't know if he can keep it up 3 weeks in a row, but it's a perfectly fine matchup for him to do it. So I like the top tier of tight end quite a bit this week. I kind of want to get to one of these 5 guys if I can. If not, I might be skipping this mid-tier a little bit. Now, in correlation, that's fine. Ferguson and Dolphins, Cowboys stuff, cool. Komet in field stuff, cool. Kraft in not really. Otten in Baker stuff, cool. But at that point, I'd rather just punt. Like, let me try a Chig again. There's not that many good punts either this week, if I'm being honest. So, something to consider for sure. All right. That'll do it. Right under 30-minute mark. Thank you all for tuning in. We have 2 more of these in the regular season, and we'll probably do one in the wild card divisional round. But we will see. Best of luck in week 16. Big one. And happy holidays to you all. Seriously. Merry Christmas if you're celebrating. Happy New Year for sure to everybody out there. Although I guess I'll be back before the new year. But happy holidays. And I hope you all have a fantastic week 16. Wishing you all the very, very best of luck. Take care, everybody.